We're all waiting for this trade deadline and for the Warriors to kind of pick a direction on this season. And maybe they won't have to choose, right? The way things are going with injuries, but there are some new trade names swirling out there. And before we touch on those and some of those possibilities and thoughts, I want to start with Steph, because ironic, poetic, however you want to put it, Steph is the most beloved basketball player of this generation, easily. And a big part of that is his playing style, the three ball, how he plays, how fun he is to watch, right? But another huge part of it is who he is, how he carries himself, how he leads, and how he's conducted himself as a superstar is very unique, right? And ironically, that's kind of part of the reason why the Warriors are in this situation. Right? What other superstar would have allowed their organization to put these rosters around them? Right? But that's the same reason we love him. He's humble, he's caring, he's understanding, right? There's all these things, and it's just a give and take. And I'm not trying to blame Steph for the situation. Don't get it twisted. But I'm just saying Steph has allowed this, right? But we have to accept that because that's the same reason we love him for a lot of reasons, if that makes sense. But what I'm ultimately trying to say is I think that Steph has to nudge this process along. He's got to help them pick a lane. And it's difficult because he's conflicted, right? And I think that there are people out there with a train of thought that, hey, you put the right pieces around him. They don't necessarily have to be stars or superstars, and 22 Steph can happen again. But I think Steph, deep down inside, knows 22 Steph can't happen again. But here he is, this ultimate competitor who still wants to win and compete, but he's also honest and humble and doesn't want to hold the organization hostage. But I think that he has to step to them and say, hey, the messaging that they've said is they're not to go all in, right? Who knows what's being said behind closed doors, but is he all right being an OG, being an unk to young players and just seeing, hey, you never know what happens. Let's develop it. Let's lean on that. And I don't take this the wrong way. I'm not comparing Steph to Chris Paul, but remember when Chris Paul was traded to that young Thunder team with SGA, and they had a little playoff run, and it was like that. Not that he would be that exact role, but Chris Paul had fun doing it, right? And Chris Paul, as we know, doesn't have any hardware or any jewelry. His legacy was not sealed at all, but he still embraced it, and it was good, fun basketball. Is Steph content with that method and heading that route, or is an all-in move that I think the organization, if it's possible, is willing to do it because what he has meant to this team, and let's be honest, the cash cow that he is for the organization. And so whether he wants this power or not, he has it. And I think he's got to help them pick a direction. Listen, man, after all the holiday spending, the New Year's can feel like a hangover for your credit. And that's where Kickoff can help a lot of people. It's a smart, legit credit hack. They're not going to run your credit. There's no hidden fees, no interest. What's important to understand, this is not a credit line to spend on. It's a credit line to build your credit. Plans start at $5 a month. You set it to auto pay, and you build your credit while you sleep. If your score is under 600, it could jump like 28 points in the first month. Now, credit is so important, whether you're trying to establish it as a young adult or you're trying to rebuild it. What you come to find is whenever there's a big purchase, whenever you're trying to rent something, the better credit you have, the more options you typically have, and the better deals you usually get, right? And so again, Kickoff is a way to start to build that with that good payment history. So shake off your credit hangover and look forward to brighter credit with Kickoff. Get your first month for just $1 at getkickoff.com/alchemy. That's 80% off at Kickoff without the C, KIKOFF.com/alchemy. Must sign up via getkickoff.com/alchemy to activate offer. Offer applies to new customers. First month only, subject to approval. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions may apply. Points start based on Equifax Vantage Score 3.0. Changes for Kickoff users starting under 600 who made the first on-time payment between January 21st and March 24. Payment and credit activity outside Kickoff can have an impact on your credit. Individual results may vary. Real quick, Jimmy Butler, it sounds like the Heat are becoming more and more motivated to get him out of their locker room, right? It's just becoming toxic. Does that mean they're willing to take less, right? Because the Warriors have kind of said, we're not interested, we're not in it. Now, if the cost is significantly less, do they reconsider? If it's possible to get Jimmy Butler without giving up Wiggins or Kuminga, which would mean Draymond probably, right? Would they reconsider that? Personally, I'm all the way out on Jimmy. He's just too much of a me guy. I don't want any part of that. A much more intriguing name right now, Zach LaVine. Now, the Warriors, I haven't read anywhere that they are like connected and interested in him. We've talked about Vucevic now for like half the season already. We already know that. We don't have to talk about that. But Zach LaVine is 29 years old, 24 points, 4 boards, 4 assists a game. Are you ready for his shooting splits though? Because they're kind of crazy when I looked them up. 51, 45, and 81. 45 from 3, 51 from the field. And if you watch Zach LaVine play, like he's not bashful offensively. This isn't a guy that's only like taking good shots. Like he's a tough shot maker, taker, high volume, right? He is a guy that can take over a game offensively and carry you offensively. He absolutely is that at 29 years old. He's had some durability issues in the past, but you know, he's still smack dab in the middle of his prime. He has that big contract that doesn't look as crazy as it once did, especially when he's performing like he has. So I'd be interested in Zach LaVine at this point. I think the problem for me is Wiggins would have to be involved, you'd imagine, to match the contract. And to me, now you're taking one piece away to add, okay, fine, if you like LaVine better than Wiggins, I'm not saying he couldn't help more, but taking a Wiggins away, now like it's kind of like, what's the point, right? Like, okay, we can score more and stuff, but when you take him out of it, now we're not really, it hurts. And so that's what's tough. But a deal would look something like Wiggins, GP2, Looney, and a first round pick. I think Zach would cost a first. At a certain point, like a year ago, right? They were trying to give you a first round pick to take LaVine's contract. Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't be heavily protected, but I think it would take some draft capital along with some expiring contracts to acquire Zach LaVine. I have a hard time, like I said, giving up Wiggins just because it makes it more of a sidestep. So I don't know, I don't think they'd be interested in Draymond, but I wouldn't be mad if they acquired Zach LaVine the way he's playing, and it would be a swing that there is a high ceiling on it. And obviously, like I just said, Vucevic is a possibility. We all know that, right? They've put Patrick Williams on the block in Chicago, who's kind of a Harrison Barnes-like 6'8", shoots the three all right, defends, quiet kid. I think his ceiling has lowered since he's been in the league. Where did he come out of Florida? Was it Florida or Florida State? It was Florida. And he was like he went a little high. Was he like 4 in that draft? But anyway, he's kind of been disappointing. He's had some injuries, but he's a solid, versatile defending wing that could help a team, and maybe a change of scenery would help him. I wonder if they'd be interested in getting in on him. But let's move on to a new name. You saw his face on the thumbnail. Daniel Gafford apparently has been made available by the Dallas Mavericks, who are looking for perimeter defense. Now, Daniel Gafford obviously is not a stretch big, right? But what he is he's 26 years old. He's a really good rim runner, really good shot blocker, and an elite lob threat. Warrior fans were familiar with him, right? We've seen plenty of him, and we've seen the impact he made last year coming to Dallas in their finals run. Could you convince Dallas to take GP2? With the understanding of, or convince more so, could they talk themselves into GP2, right? And say, all right, well, he just has to be healthy at the right time. They know as well as anyone in the league what GP2 can do in a playoff series, right? And if it's like, if he were healthy for their playoff run, like does that Celtics series looks different with GP2 out there on Tatum and Brown and how disruptive he can be. And then the other aspect would be, because I've heard others say, well, Dallas, if they are going to trade Gafford, it's not going to be to the Western Conference and help another Western Conference team. The other aspect would probably be the Mavericks viewing the Warriors as a non-threat. Like, hey, they're cooked. We're not going to have to worry about them. And so could you send GP2 and Looney to Dallas for Daniel Gafford? Would you want to? It would be Daniel Gafford and Dwight Powell to make the salaries work. They get another center because Derek Lively has had some durability issues. So they do have another playoff tested guy in Looney who can play with Clay, obviously. And then they get their POA, their point of attack defender, who they just cross their fingers will be healthy at the right time. The Warriors get younger. GP2 and Looney are expiring. As much as they've meant to the organization over this last decade, right? Those two, there's a very high chance both of those guys don't return next year anyway. And so you acquire Daniel Gafford, another center in the prime of his career, who's just ahead. He's Trace-like, but he's far ahead of Trace at 26 in his development. And he's a longer, better basketball athlete. So I don't know what that does, how much that helps the Warriors, but right now, but it helps them get younger and more athletic towards the future and bigger, not to mention, right? So I don't know. What you guys, let me know in the comments what you think of that one. Now, a name that has been connected to the Warriors for several years now, it feels like, is John Collins. All the way back to when he was in Atlanta. He's been in Utah the last 2 seasons. He's 27 years old. He's giving them 17 and 8. He's a 6'9" power forward, very bouncy, pretty strong, good athlete, right? But here's the interesting part about John Collins and what he's been doing this year. No one's watching Utah, right? Where's Lauri Markkanen? I like to say that. But so Collins broke his hand in Atlanta like 2.5 years ago, and it really destroyed his three-point shooting that was coming along, right? Like that was the final piece for him offensively. Can he stretch the floor? After he broke his hand, it was like a brutal one where the hand was like decapitated looking. He just couldn't shoot the ball. His shot was super funky. Well, he's shooting 43% this year from three. He's only taken like 2.5 a game, but it's at enough volume to where you would think, okay, he's refound that, and he could potentially be an answer to some of these scoring issues for the Warriors. Like he is a scoring forward. He's a vertical spacer. He's reshooting the three. You give him the ball on a smaller guy, he will put them in the basket. He likes to score, jumps out the gym, rebounds well. Now defensively, I don't know how much he's going to help you, right? He's not the shot blocker. He'll shot block. That's not true, but he's not a stopper. He's not a true rim protector, right? But he could enhance an offense. He really could. And so what would a deal look like for John Collins? As always, it's what would it cost? And especially when you're dealing with Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz. Could you send them GP2, Slow-Mo, and Looney? Now you'd probably have to send picks as well, right? But you look for the Jazz, you're getting off of contract, right? Because Collins has 2 more years. Looney and GP2 are expiring. Slow-Mo, I don't know. I don't know what they would think of him, but he's a guy that could play a nice vet to have around their young guys, and then it would really be dependent on the draft compensation. But another move that would get you a big player in his prime moving forward and some more athleticism. Not, before I looked up, because admittedly, I'm not watching Utah games. I don't think anybody is. But before I looked up his three-point shooting, my immediate thought was like, well, his jumper's completely broken. Like that kind of disvalued him to me. But if he's refound that three ball where he will knock it down open in the corners, I'm a little intrigued, right? But ultimately, did you hear what Kenny Smith said at halftime of that game yesterday where it is what it is, right? I don't think any of us expected to win that game. And I had seen a tweet where it was like, dang, the Chase crowd isn't even booing them. I didn't think they deserved to be booed last night or yesterday afternoon, I should say, because the effort was there, man. They came out hungry with more energy than the Celtics, and the effort was there. The firepower was not. And so in that instance, I don't think I wouldn't have booed. I boo when I feel like a team is rolling over and not trying. And that wasn't the case against the Celtics. But Kenny Smith at halftime said, hey, they got to get younger. Whether they trade or they don't trade, they've got to lean into the youth and get younger and build around Steph that way because he doesn't need the ball. And I think most fans are at that point, right? Like there is no point in getting even KD, right? Like KD, Jimmy Butler, some of these guys that are at the same phase as Steph. Again, it just doesn't seem to make sense. Now, what is that move? I threw out some young athletic bigs here, and I'm sure that there's plenty of guys that are available that we don't even know about, but it goes back to Steph kind of helping them pick a direction. Is Steph going to be content being an OG and being a mentor and seeing with these, building around young guys? And does that mean moving off of Draymond? Maybe. I don't know. But to be honest, the ceiling of going young is probably higher than the ceiling of getting some vets and another aging star, in my opinion, at this point. And so I hope that, what do we got? Like couple more weeks here before the deadline. I just want a direction to be picked. And I'm perfectly fine leaning into the youth. I want to see, and as bad as that game was yesterday, I do the breakdown for every game. There's a breakdown right now of that one. But there were some positives as far as Trace and Moody. And I am curious to see what Trace, what Moody, Pods, Kuminga, what they would look like in the final 20 games of this season if they do kind of punt, right? 20, 30 games, if they do punt and they're just like, all right, and they have more freedom, less pressure to win night to night, where they can work on their game in real live games. It's one thing to go through the drills and talk about adding elements, pump fakes, foot replaces, different types of finishes, but to try it out in game is where you're going to really gain the confidence to do so. And our young guys really haven't had that runway because of this tight window that everybody's focused on. I think for our young players, there's far more pressure play to play than a lot of the other young players around the league where they've kind of just had the freedom to figure things out. But yeah, man, let me know where y'all stand in the comments as far as leaning into the youth, going young, or do you want to reload with vets and still hunt a star around Steph? You know, the reality is, as well as the Kings are playing, right, they're probably not going to get out of the first round or the play-in, right? And then Milwaukee, we'll see, there is a possibility that a De'Aaron Fox or a Giannis is available this summer. And so they may just keep their powder dry and wait for the summer. And if that's the case, then I think they need to do it sooner rather than later and let the young guys develop and see what they can really do with some freedom at the back end of this season. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.